All right. So I'm Molly Godfrey. I'm going to be moderating our panel on celebrating Sims, bridging generations in local Black community storytelling and post-custodial preservation projects. This roundtable is going to explore some of the challenges and successes of developing community, university, K-12 partnerships to support Black historical recovery, post-custodial archival preservation, and storytelling work. Celebrating Sims was started in 2015 by residents from Harrisonburg's Northeast neighborhood, the local Black Heritage Center, and James Madison University professors and students. The goal of the project was to remember the Lucy F. Sims School, which served Black students in Harrisonburg from 1938 to 1965. The project has produced a large permanent exhibit, satellite exhibits at local schools and libraries, an online post-custodial archive of hundreds of photographs, maybe close to 1,000. I don't want to get the numbers wrong. Satellite exhibits at local schools and libraries, an online post-custodial archive, and K-12 lesson plans. Most recently, the team partnered with K-12 teachers and students to conduct oral histories with former Sims students and to transcribe those oral histories and share them with the public online. And we're now working to create a freestanding kiosk to support what community access to these oral histories, the kiosk to be installed in the former Lucy F. Sims School, which is now a community center in the neighborhood. Lessons learned from our long-term work on this project are also feeding the development of a new database of like-minded projects, which we call Mapping the Black Digital and Public Humanities. So in this roundtable, I'm going to offer a brief overview of our work and then ask our panelists, who are library professionals and graduate students whose work was absolutely essential to making all of this happen, speak about their various roles in the project so far and our plans for the future. So again, I'm your moderator. I'm Molly Godfrey. I'm a professor of English and African American, and Diaspora Studies at James Madison University. I've published a couple of books like Conversations with Lorraine Hansberry and Neopassing, Performing Identity After Jim Crow. I have another book coming out this spring on Black women's literature of the segregation period, and I've coordinated a number of Black archival recovery projects, which we're talking about today. Kirsten Lodinia is a digital project specialist at James Madison University Libraries, where she collaborates closely with faculty, students, and staff to deliver expert guidance and instruction on a variety of digital initiatives. Kirsten supported the Celebrating Sims project by collaborating with the instructors involved, the K-12 instructors, on project development, teaching students how to record oral histories, coordinating consent forms, transcribing the audio, and publishing the final content. Mariam Ismail is previously served as a graduate assistant in digital projects at James Madison University Libraries, where she contributed to the Celebrating Sims project. She is now a digital projects coordinator at Virginia Tech Libraries. In her current role, Mariam focuses on integrating diverse mediums and modalities to foster innovative scholarship across campus. She supports the university community by enhancing their abilities and confidence in the creative process, new technologies, and accessible education. Grover Saunders, over at the end, is an immersive and digital project specialist for JMU Libraries. Grover provides a wide variety of services to faculty and students in support of their scholarly goals. For Celebrating Sims, Grover is working to develop a digital kiosk that will allow visitors to the Sims Center to explore our year-long oral history project that celebrates and preserves the memories of former Lucy F. Sims students. And then Ben Cook, right there, is a graduate student at James Madison University's Master's in English program and a current graduate assistant in digital projects at JMU Libraries, where he is beginning work on Celebrating Sims, as well as other Black digital humanities projects. His current interests are digital humanities, gender and sexuality, and historicism. All right, so I'm going to walk us through the project a little bit and then turn things over to our panelists to talk about their roles on the project. So Lucy F. Sims was born enslaved in 1856. After emancipation, she received her degree from Virginia's Hampton Institute and eventually settled in Harrisonburg to teach over 1,800 students from 3 generations of families. The Lucy F. Sims School was built soon after her death, named for her, and served African American students from all over Rockingham County and beyond from 1938 to 65. The original exhibit, which spans 150 years of history from before Lucy F. Sims' birth to pretty much the present day, tells the story of the school in terms of its place at the heart of local community life. So when we started this project, this is the school. You can see here the walls of the building. There was very little trace of the school's history or the woman after whom it was named visible at the school. It had been shut down in 1965 and then reopened later as a community center, but without that kind of trace or record of its historical legacy. So we worked with over 60 community partners, including dozens of former Sims students, local Black heritage institutions, as well as 18 JMU undergraduate students to collaborate on a permanent exhibit, website, and companion booklet that launched in 2016. None of the records or photographs associated with this history were preserved in traditional archives at that time, so this was a real, like we were conducting memory parties, scanning photographs from family albums and whatnot in order to actually create the archive out of which, the post-custodial archive out of which this exhibit could be formed. So here we have some of our students working with community members at these memory parties, going through photo albums, listening to stories, gathering names, and scanning photographs. Eventually we were able to create a exhibit that you can see here was installed, permanently installed on the walls of the former school and now community center. Now we have 5 permanent exhibits, not only at the Sims Center, but also at local high schools in Harrisonburg and the surrounding county. We've created a traveling exhibit for libraries, middle schools, and community centers, all of which were installed between 2017 and 2021. So here you can see the version that is up at Harrisonburg High School in the main atrium of the school. And here you can see the traveling version. And then we also created a new exhibit, a conference room exhibit that's based on the story of one of the most beloved teachers at the Lucy F. Sims School, Mary Awkward Fairfax, who taught 2nd grade there for many, many years. And we were able to take her old classroom, which is now the conference room, and turn it into an exhibit about her life and her contributions to the community. And we have updated the website, redesigned the website, added all of this new material, a lot of new material to the website as part of a post-custodial archive. The metadata for that was rethought and refined. We worked with local community members to kind of get more names. And we hired translators to make Spanish and Arabic versions of the exhibit on our website so that, in particular for our very multilingual community, students and families speaking multiple languages are able to access the material. And then finally, we worked with these folks and some local high schools, very generous and thoughtful local high school teachers, to pilot a curriculum-embedded oral history project that was piloted in 2 local high schools as part of their African American history class in 2022 and 2023, in which high school students worked with former Lucy F. Sims School students and conducted oral histories with those students after doing a lot of their own research, recorded those oral histories, and then these folks helped us transcribe them and make them available on our website. So here you can see some of our students working with community members. Really the driving, I don't know why that's there, the driving impulse behind all of this work is the idea of sharing authority, which involves a plurality of voices and a more participatory historical production. The goals of the SWIM's Oral History Project, which we're talking about today, that the teachers helped develop, were to help students understand a national story, the idea of, they were particularly talking about desegregation through the eyes of our local community, to help students develop more nuanced understandings of historical complexity, develop in students deep research, communication and collaboration skills, share and preserve local memories of segregation, desegregation, and local Black community life, and really importantly, help bridge generations through the sharing and preservation of history. You can see here we had an oral historian come talk to the students to help prepare them for their own interviews. So I'm going to turn things over now to our library experts to tell us a little bit about their role in the project, the experience they brought in the project, and the value that they are taking away from it. Starting here with Kirsten.
See how using a microphone works. So I'm Kirsten. I'm a digital project specialist. So my role in this project was kind of project support and planning and project management for kind of the small details, with Sean and Molly doing like the big picture pieces. And Miriam was a GA in my department at that time, but also came to us with robust experience in oral histories and podcasting and this sort of work. So she was deeply entrenched in everything they did. So we're going to be kind of trading back and forth for these next few bits. And I just want to say what a blessing it is to get to work with Molly on these projects, because she always centers the communities that we're going into, which provides a really helpful framework for creating processes and making decisions, because at the end of the day, you know, it's not necessarily about what's going to be the most efficient or easiest for us to do, but what's to the greatest benefit of the people that we are working with and trying to like help preserve the history that came before us. You want to hit the next slide? Yeah. Sorry. So like Molly mentioned, we worked with 3 local teachers, Tim Van Shake, Owen Longanker, and Jennifer Dean. They were truly a blessing, and fortunately we had the flexibility to bring this kind of project into the curriculum, because they were teaching an elective course on African American history. If we had tried to do this in a classroom, like a standard history classroom with like SOLs and other standards, we probably wouldn't have been able to do it. But fortunately we had that flexibility and just the blessing of those 3 people. They really did a lot of work and took on a huge undertaking. But to help support them in that, we had a big meeting with them in the summer before the school year even kicked off, just to kind of talk about the scope of this project, what it would look like to implement it into their classroom. God bless them, I gave them like a 5-page document of the process of doing oral histories and like the phases of it and the key deliverables, and they didn't go running, they like hung with us. We also were lucky to have the support of faculty from the College of Education and instructional designers from the library to help them figure out how to do an oral history of project of this magnitude in the classroom with high school students. And because it's an elective course, you know, you have students from 9th grade to 12th grade with all kinds of different skill sets and capabilities. So figuring out how do we scaffold the skill set so the students can competently and confidently step into doing this work. And, you know, they of course have their own pedagogical experience to bring to the table. But just pairing the assignments with the technological skills the students would need, and also figuring out what pieces would make sense for them to handle and what pieces like the library was going to handle. So we had a lot of discussion on those fronts, as well as like the technology involved, figuring out what recording devices to use. We also went into the classrooms and like taught the students once we'd come up with our decision on like what would make the most sense to record, to make sure the students had opportunities to learn about the process of conducting oral histories and using the equipment.
So the hands-on element is very important for them to feel confident with the use of these new technologies. And with students in high school, I think just given their familiarity with different kinds of technology, it's very easy for them to pick it up once they have it in their hands and they've hit the recording button and they can see the waves and stuff. I find it important to give them encouragement, motivation, go sit at the tables with them. We broke them up into groups so that they could test and interview each other and kind of go through the whole experience. So sitting down with them, what are you talking about? How does it feel? Things like that. And having them hold the technology and then go through this whole process, these are all transferable skills that they can put on their CVs or bring with them to college or, okay. And for many of them, it was motivations for them to carry out their own projects. And some of the students did actually go on and do interviews outside of the scope of our project because they just got so into it. And part of the workshop is something that we try to integrate is this community engaged element. So teaching them how to not just go in, tape the interview, and leave, but creating those relationships, how they can talk to them, times where they might have to pause if there's something difficult being discussed. And bringing oral history to the students at that age, it kind of brings a critical lens to their education, and previous panelists have talked about the miseducation in our public school systems. So this is kind of a way for them to rethink what counts as history and expand their thinking outside of what may be in their books.
And just on the topic of building relationships and community-based learning, that's another piece of this that Sean and Molly did a really great job in thinking through, having dates built into the project where the students met with the folks that were going to be involved to do the oral histories and just like casually meet them and talk with them and build that rapport, weeks before we went in and did the oral history, so that the group of students working with the individuals were familiar with them and had some kind of basis of understanding and familiarity with each other before they sat down to talk about like some pretty heavy topics in the end. And I think that kind of helped the oral histories flow. When people feel comfortable with each other, it's easier to like have a conversation. So that kind of covers our pre-recording to recording phase. And as all of y'all who are engaged in the process of oral histories, that's like when the real work starts to happen. So we had all of these wonderful interviews, and then we had to figure out how do we get these transcribed in a timely manner and share them out with the folks that we conducted the interviews with. Some of them more comfortable with technology than others. So we ended up coming with a like multifaceted and iterative transcript process where we initially put it into Otter AI, and then we'd have someone go through and do a cleanup pass, and then it would pass on to a secondary person to go through it again. So I think pretty much everyone at this table and some other people in this room as well, we all did a lot of transcribing on these oral histories. And then we would share them out with the individuals so they could review them, answer like specific questions we had if we couldn't quite make out names, or if they wanted to like clarify things. We'd give them even copies of the audio. In some cases, we were like burning CDs so they could access it, and doing a lot of this like through mail and hard copies. And then once we had made our updates to the transcription, sending them informed consent to get it published on the website. So just making sure they understood where it was going, that they were fully happy with the audio and transcription as they'd reviewed it. And they understood that even though it's hosted on the website, like they still have like ownership of it. They can request that it come down, and also making clear how folks can use this content. So just trying to be very transparent in all of that and make the copyright legalese easily understandable to the community that we were working with. And then, yeah, once we had all of those pieces, getting everything actually stood up and published on the website, which Miriam did a lot of work to help with those descriptions.
So I did a lot of work on the transcriptions, especially the first passes. And as Molly and Kirsten have said, I was a GA when I started this project, and actually it was the first thing that I started on my first day at JMU. I am lucky to have you guys. But this was kind of a really interesting way for me to get to know the place that I was in, especially since I had been living outside of the US for a number of years and I had never lived in Virginia or anywhere this south. So it kind of changed the way I moved and explored this new space, how I got to know the space-time mattering of this place, the history, the people, even street names and what was behind them. It also helped me get used to the Southern accent. And so as I was doing these transcriptions and getting to hear all of these rich stories, I started noticing themes and repeating narratives. Sometimes it would just be about a certain teacher that people thought was very interesting or sometimes very difficult. It's okay. But noting these themes at that stage, I think, helped in other areas. And especially, I think, the transcription, something that Kirsten touched upon, is that we really try to handle them on a case-by-case basis. Molly was in communication with people. It was such a dialogue, coming back and forth, respecting their concerns, and kind of tuning into the individual needs. We did have a workflow, but also knowing that we had to be adaptable. And so once we had finished finished some of the transcriptions, the ones that I finished, I started writing descriptions for them for the website, and that was also a process where I had to be very cognizant of what I was including, what I was not including, because in the end, it's very interpretive, what takeaways you want to include in the interview. And then the themes ended up being quite helpful because I ended up working on a few highlight reels with big themes, so taking little snippets from interviews and putting them into a bigger narrative to tell a bigger story. And this was because we did try and be on the ground. We attended the Harrisonburg Rockingham African American Festival, and we had a booth and we had iPads and we were sharing out those oral histories, and some of the teachers came and some of the families came. And it was very important to reach out to the community in that way. And so thinking about these highlight reels as a bite-sized content that people can stand for 5 minutes and kind of get an idea of what is in this huge multifaceted project.
Sort of leads really well into where Grover is helping the project to go into.
All right, is this working now? Yeah, okay. I was very fortunate. I joined the project very, very late, so almost all of the really hard work had already been done, which is very exciting. Yeah, my piece of the project is an interactive kiosk that we're setting up in the SEM Center, focused on the oral histories, and trying to make that content as accessible as possible. It's wonderful that we have these, hour-long, 90-minute oral histories, but probably not a lot of middle schoolers are going to sit and listen to a 90-minute oral history. And so just trying to pull some of that out. Again, I mostly just pulled from the work these guys had already done because even, the part I was most daunted by was, well, how do I find good, interesting content? And as Miriam just told us, she had already done that. I was able to go in and pull those out. So the kiosk is still being built. It's sort of maybe just about ready for its sort of first review from the clients and that kind of thing. So here there's some specs on the screen. We found a antibacterial touchscreen that we could use with a Raspberry Pi on it, and it is actually hosting just a static website. We don't have any kind of access to the internet there, so we have to build something that can operate completely autonomously. And so I'm actually using a content management system called Statamic to create an authoring interface for folks to use. Something I've become very cognizant of is thinking about, if I leave the project or if I go somewhere else, can folks who have no idea still make contributions to the project, trying to build things. So ultimately, it is just a simple static website that should be pretty easy to update, but then the Statamic interface provides us a way to let folks go in and just make small updates without even having to dig into any of that. And I guess if anybody has questions about that, I'm happy to go into more details. We have just a couple, if you want just a couple screenshots of the interface.
This is what it looks like on the website.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah,
yes.
up here, and then this is how it will look on the
Skeuomorphism is back. Tell your friends.
And these are the themes down here?
Yeah, so basically each of the tickets at the bottom represent sort of pull quotes. And then there's, again, Miriam had already created these highlight reels with, 2-minute or so bits of audio and created relevant slideshows that went with them. So I was able to just kind of split those out and plug those in pretty easily. So each person in the collection has, 3 to 5 quotes that are available to them. And we have 7 or maybe 8. We maybe just added an 8th person to the collection. And then the next slide is just a picture of what the Statamic interface looks like, and there's nothing too exciting there, but there it is.
I think this audience thinks it's exciting.
I'm gonna stop talking now.
Yeah. Can you all? We'll get to Ben's portion in just a second, but first, can you all tell us a little bit about some of the challenges that you encountered working on this and how you met them along the way?
We definitely had some challenges with the initial audio quality. Like, the students did a fantastic job with the equipment, but I don't think I had a full understanding of how much background noise there was going to be in the rooms that they were in, and also the logistics of some of the interviews changed a lot from conception to, like, on the day. There's some that we planned, like, there's going to be 2 people in here, and then there were like 7. So I had to do a lot of work with the audio after the fact to enhance the quality and optimize it. For some of them were like we didn't have to touch them at all. The transcription process was also really interesting. I think a lot of people have kind of a gut reaction the first time they hear their voice recorded played back to them, and they don't like it, and it makes them uncomfortable. And so we ended up having a lot of dialogue, and Molly especially was in conversation with folks about redactions that they wanted or experiencing discomfort about participating in the project. Initially we had a lot of requests for redactions, and I think in the end the only redaction we ended up making was one of the interviewees made reference to a relationship between 2 of the students who'd conducted the interviews, but they were no longer dating at that point. So we had to strike that from the historical record. But Molly, if you want to speak more to that, I think you were engaged in those conversations.
Well, I remember
more deeply than we were.
To one of our interviewees, the Tollivers, I think Ruth Tolliver in particular did some editing of her husband's interview, and I think she initially reading it, she wanted to correct a lot of his grammar, which is totally, we had lots of different ways that people could go about this, and it was, that was definitely something we were willing to do if that's what she wanted. But then through some conversation, at the end, she was like, this is my husband's voice. We need to keep his voice the way it is. And so sometimes it was about, having options for people listening, talking it through, and then letting them make the decision that they wanted, that they felt best represented them and what they wanted to see out there in the world.
And I think that this experience, as challenging as it was at times and how much back and forth there was, it gave me a model and a framework as I approach other projects. JMU was a PWI. I'm now at Virginia Tech, which is a land-grant university that was built by enslaved people. So sometimes when partnering or supporting communities, understanding that there may be an inherent mistrust of this institution and respecting that, hearing it out, working with that in mind, just being cognizant of it. And when someone gives you their story, that is a responsibility. You have to think about the way they want to be represented, really take that into consideration, especially if it's public facing, and providing them with a sense of ownership over their story and their voice. And yeah, I think that's my part.
And I think I'd just add to that, like having the high school students there really brought a new dimension to this work, because I think it helped our participants right on both sides feel that this was about those generations connecting with one another, not about JMU, which was offering support in various ways, but that it was much more about bringing those two generations together in conversations that they could learn from each other. I mean, there were phone numbers exchanged. Yeah.
It's true. In some of the interviews, some of the things we had to cut out, like in the last 5 minutes, people were like, next time I'm in town, I'll take you all out to lunch and dinner.
Come visit me at my house. Here's my address.
Yeah.
Little redactions here and there. But yeah, the intergenerational element of it, for sure, gave the students confidence, gave the former sim school students, I guess, a level of comfort. And yeah, I think that as JMU, we really try to be a supporting force, like behind the scenes, and allowing them to make it their own.
I have one very silly one, which is that because I came in late, I failed to recognize and realize, like I was kind of completely unaware of this project. And so I came into it working on the oral history parts of it and had no idea. Again, you started this by saying there's this massive collection of like thousands of, or not thousands, almost 1,000 documents and images and things like that. And I didn't know any of that existed. And so I was like, do we have a second picture of this person? And they're like, oh, no, we have hundreds. So yeah, that was a challenge. Just me getting up to speed with what the collection was and the work, again, all the huge amounts of work that had already been done.
Yeah. And I'll just say, leading into what Ben's been working on, that one of the obstacles we've experienced, big picture, I mean, this is a project that's been going on since 2015, so 9 years, that we have been kind of rolling out iterative stages, which means like lots and lots of small grants, lots and lots of new partnerships, and lots of work. And it's difficult, as we all, I think, in this room know, to sustain these projects over such a long period. And yet it's incredibly important to me, to all of us, that we do that we keep them sustained, that we keep them going, that we keep that visible like relationship and collaboration and support for our communities happening. And so part of what we started to ask ourselves as we were like continuing to try to make this happen is like, is it always this hard? Is everyone else working this hard all the time? How are they doing it? How do other people make this work? Where are they? What if we could all like share resources or strategies about the actual like logistics? And so we started working on a new project, thinking about this kind of, projects that relate to this kind of work of Black digital archival preservation, public humanities work, and we were just like, where are they? And so we had another graduate student who couldn't be with us today who did some initial research and started to map projects related to Black digital and public humanities, starting with a data set that was really focused on the United States, to see where they are and to find out more about what they're about and how they operate, who does the work, how do they fund themselves, and all that kind of thing. And that is what Ben is working on now. So I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about his work on this project, which is called Mapping the Black Digital and Public Humanities, and you can find it there online at that URL.
All right, hello. Awesome, it works. So much like Grover, I also came into this project a little bit late. So our missing fellow graduate assistant did a ton of work getting the logistics set up and making sure that all of the technology meshes with one another. And I really appreciate all of what she's done. I just wanted to say my piece, because what I have been working on is more of kind of a liaison between the projects and our own project, because fundamentally how this project has kind of expanded is that not only have we added now 670 projects, we also have added a ton of other countries to the map. So we now have a much more international database. And so finding ways to communicate, hey, this is how you're going to be represented on the map. Are you cool with this? What would you change? And also just getting our international kind of priorities to mesh. Because something that I found out very quickly doing this work is that in the United States, a lot of digital humanities projects are very, forward. This is where we got our funding. This is how we got our money. It's not quite exactly the same in every other country in the world. And so, gently prodding when we can, saying, can you tell us more, was a lot of how I spent my time with this project. And that is really what this project is about, is creating this social network of all of these Black digital and public humanities projects. And there are multitudes contained within the map. Some of these projects vary from everything from community action groups to trying to establish open Wi-Fi access in Nigeria, to local histories, further oral histories. So I do highly recommend you all check it out at some point. But another service that, I shouldn't say service, another thing that our website hosts are data visualizations of the projects that we have recorded to our map. And so if you go to our map, you can actually see what topics that other scholars are talking about, when are they talking about them. If you look at the map, physically, where are they talking about them? And so all of these tools really do give us quite a good insight into where are these issues, more important, where are we seeing strong independent scholar work, where are we seeing the big institutions, kind of going along and furthering these projects. And so again, I urge you, it's a really cool website. But yeah, and so another really awesome aspect of what this is doing is not only within time and space are we seeing where this scholarship is coming out of, we're also able to see how these communities are connected to one another, because every quarter we tend to send out a little reminder email, hey, we've done this, check this thing out, to those who we've contacted and added to the map. And every quarter or so we'll get like 1 or 2 people unsubscribing, and that's fine. And then we'll look at our submissions and see that we have even more projects being added to the map. And so not only is this model highly helpful for scholars in this field, but it's also sustainable. Every quarter we're getting more projects to the map. I mean, even what we have on this slide is now outdated. So this project does have a lot of really cool stuff on it, and I really hope you do check it out. Just go to a random point on the map, just click something.
Add your projects. So it has this, you can find projects by their location by clicking on the dots or by zooming in. You can also filter them by project type, topics covered, modality, organization type, right? If you wanted to find community org-run projects, or even like project creator type, like if you wanted to find projects that were primarily created by librarians or by undergraduate students or at an HBCU. So there's all kinds of ways that you can filter, and there's a search function, and then of course data visualizations that help you kind of like see a picture of the field, which we know is incomplete. We know there's so much more out there in the world. So now we have a lot of time. We wanted to make sure we left some time for questions and answers. So if anyone has questions for us.
Hi. Hello? Okay. Hi. I just want to say this is an amazing project and just good job. Like, this is really cool. But my question, well, it's kind of a two-parter. As someone who's planning on going into the field of education and history, I'm a history education major here at Virginia Tech. And I just want to ask, do you think that the high school students were very, like, just genuinely interested in, like, the work that they were doing and they were really excited about it? Or, because I find, especially as someone who recently just got out of high school, a lot of high schoolers about history aren't really excited about it, stuff like that. It's kind of, a lot of people see it as boring. So do you think that this kind of project kind of made them have a new view on history, and maybe even got them interested as in something that they could potentially major in college or have a field of interest in?
I mean, I'll say, I think what the teachers reported was that, exactly that this project answered exactly that problem, right, that they often see with their students, and that students just, partly it's like that kind of knowing that you have to do something and that it's real meant that the students had to step up, right? But it was also actually just like learning the history from the primary source, right? From another human being who they formed a connection with, made it come alive to them in ways that I think a textbook and maybe even just a book, right, like a novel or another oral history that somebody else had might not have done for them. And I think the third piece is that, like, that telling a story that is typically told as a national history that they may not have any direct relationship to, through the landmarks that they see every day, through the people that they see every day, through names and buildings that they see every day, made that history feel so much more relevant to their own lives. And so I think that there was a real, like, we were seeing some historians in the making in that room, and some digital technologists in the making too. I think a lot of them got really excited about the technology aspect as well.
Yeah, just to expand on that, I think initially they were like daunted by the prospects. I have to go talk with a stranger. I have to go talk with a stranger that's a completely different generation than me. But then they really grew in confidence, like, so they developed these really cool relationships with the folks that they were interviewing. I think it really changed their perspective too. I think not just students, like, a lot of people feel like history is something that happened outside of their community, right? It's a bigger scale than, like, where I live. And so we definitely heard from a lot of them, like, wow, I had no idea, like, this happened in Harrisonburg, or like this school existed, and kind of connecting with their local community in a new way. And we had one student who ran across someone, I think in her church, who had also attended the Sims school that, like, wasn't part of the group we were working directly with, but she was so excited that she's like, well, I have the recorder and I have the skill set, and I just want to interview you. And kind of going out and continuing on, like, from the experience that they had in the classroom. And also it's important to acknowledge that we may have been working with a pre-selected population, and the fact that it was an elective course, right? They chose to be in a history class on African American history. So in some ways, they had some kind of interest or like willingness to be there, and that helps too.
And we did preserve a number of student reflections on the website. So if you're interested in reading those, they're up there on the website with the oral histories.
One final point I'll make is I think that students in general, and this is one of the big reasons why digital projects, in my opinion, should be integrated into more classrooms, whether that's universities or in high schools, is they get more excited and engaged when they know that their name is going to be somewhere on a website and they can share it and send a link. It just affects how they approach the work.
Yeah, kind of on the flip side. So I appreciated you talking about some of the challenges of engaging or collaborating with the elders in the community because of that long history of many reasons. How did you guys recruit participants to be interviewed for this project?
So we've been working with a lot of these folks since 2015 through the Sims project, the Celebrating Sims exhibit, right? So that project really began, I had been working with the Shenandoah Valley Black Heritage Center in Harrisonburg for about a year prior to that. And then the director and I decided to like, oh, we should do something about the school. That's what everyone's been asking for. You know, she had people coming in all the time to do like DNA work and stuff, and they were always coming into that building and kind of upset, right, that the building didn't have any trace of their experience. So there was a need that we already knew was coming from the community, and so we started meeting with people in the community. So I've been working with a lot of these people since 2015 to figure out what they wanted. And so I think the fact that we already had that long relationship, had already done this exhibit that was very much a community-driven project, and you know, we had a community advisory board that met with students like 3 or 4 times over the course of the design to review and to revise, meant that when it came to doing this, it was already responding to a second round of need that had come from the community. So I think Mayor Deanna Reed, who you can see on our website, is a member of this community. She was among several who said, what we really need to do is preserve voices of our elders and these students while we still have them. So we were responding to that call from the community and kind of thinking through this project and thinking through how to make this work in a way that would also bring in younger generations. And so I think the fact that we had that kind of long relationship and that the need was coming not from us, but from them, helped make all of that happen. That said, no matter how excited people were about doing this, everyone was shy about doing it themselves. And so there was also like a kind of long conversation process with individuals who we kind of sought out, mostly people that we had been working with who had already worked with students in one way or another, or had worked on the project in one way or another, a kind of long conversation to figure out whether this was something they were comfortable with. And there were a lot of people we worked with in the first half of the project who decided that they weren't really comfortable with this part. Sometimes it was because they were like worried they would say something that their friend would be mad about. You know, there was sometimes like very personal reasons why people weren't comfortable sharing their stories in this way. So we ended up with a group of, I think it was at 10 or 11. We've only fully lost one person who, after doing it, decided I'm actually not comfortable sharing it.
Yeah, thanks for sharing this. It's a remarkable project. I had 2 questions about the project. One you alluded to, but I'm interested in. Students graduate and go on to other things. I mean, I know you're a professor, but eventually you're younger than I am. But one day you will retire. What is your long-term preservation plan for a project like this? Because I mean, digital projects are quite different from books or articles. You publish your book and it's on the shelf and you walk away from it. But a digital project is sort of, you can keep working on it forever, but it's not in print. It needs to be constantly updated. So do you have a long-term preservation plan for 10 years, 50 years out? And then my second question, just from an academic perspective, the Academy tends to value peer review and things that are in print that our colleagues understand. Is this something that you do as a labor of love with students, or do your colleagues recognize the value of this sort of thing?
Well, it's a multimodal project, so in some ways it is both in print and digital because we have the exhibits. Obviously, that depends on those might deteriorate over time. We have had to get subsequent grants to replace panels occasionally, or mostly the traveling panels were the most fragile. So yeah, I mean, I think that the physical material has all been gifted to the places where they've been installed, and those places also have copies of the digital files. So if there ever were a need and I were no longer around to replace the physical exhibits, those institutions would be able to replace the panels themselves. They're not very expensive to print. The digital archive, I might have to turn over. I mean, it's hosted by JMU Libraries. We have a long-term relationship and understanding with them to continue hosting, and they have committed resources to making updates when Omeka goes through it's built on Omeka, so when Omeka goes through some kind of change. Everything that we scanned, that 1,000 photographs, it's a post-custodial archive, so all of the physical items were returned to the community. We scanned things and then returned them. So you're right that those things do still exist in the world, right? And some of them have since been donated to JMU, others have been donated to other institutions or organizations like the Shenandoah Valley Black Heritage Center that I worked with. So there are physical copies elsewhere. I might turn it over to you guys to say if you have anything of long-term sustainability plan for the digital piece.
I mean, as long as we have like a project sponsor, we can keep things going and keep them live. So even when Molly retires, if there are other people interested in like stewarding the project, we will do our work to keep it alive and keep it going. And should we reach a day where that's no longer the case, there's lots of ways that we can take snapshots of the website as it existed, and it can stop being a live record, but still be accessible and available in a way that doesn't take a lot of effort for us to maintain. So I don't know that we've got like a full MOU in place about like what that process will look like, but we have procedures in place for projects generally. So I think it's in good hands. Not whatever the future holds, but for many of the things the future could hold.
Yeah. And when I get closer to retirement, I promise you I'll make a plan. As far as tenure and promotion stuff, I just don't care. But when I started this project, it was not something that my direct colleagues understood, and I just made sure to do enough of the work that they did understand so that I could still do this work. I've since put myself in position to rewrite our tenure and promotion guidelines in my own department. So now, anyone doing work like this can get tenure and promotion for that work. But the typical answer is for a lot of us, we have to do double the work, right? You have to do the work, and then you have to write about it. But that's no longer the case in my department now. You just need 2 letters of like a kind of in lieu of peer review to attest to the scholarly value of a public or digital project.
I was really interested to hear about how you were bringing in like the history into a space that's still being used, right, in the community today. So could you speak a little bit more about how you made some of the decisions? I mean, like you mentioned being accessible, something that people might look at, in a short amount of time. But how did you kind of come to decide what you would put in that space to kind of bring that history into it, on a more consistent basis?
We're talking about the exhibit or the oral history kiosk? Okay. Well, in the exhibit, there was a big accessibility issue, which was that the school building has one of those, what are those bars called that runs across the middle of the wall? Like a bullnose, which meant that we actually had to hang the exhibit higher than we would have liked. Right, so there's sort of I think a bit of an accessibility issue there that we just couldn't get around because of the structure of the building, and it's a historic building, and you can't make changes, and et cetera. In terms of the content of the exhibit, that was decided with our community partners, our community advisory board. They decided what topics. The students actually talked to them, listened to them, came up with a list of topics that they were hearing they wanted on the walls, and then went back to them and said, are these the right topics? And then revised, and then drafted like kind of possible panels that would fit each topic and said, are these the right topics? And then revised. So that was all very kind of collaborative and iterative process. I don't know, Grover, if you want to speak a little bit about the decisions you're making in the kiosk. But I know that for the kiosk, the key thing there was that a lot of our partners do not necessarily have internet access at home or computers at home. So the fact that we put the oral histories on the website is not really that helpful to them. And some of them just don't, even though we've got all this on the website, there's a lot of folks in our community that don't even know the website exists. We keep telling them, but they're like, what? So as much as possible, we want to have everything, as much of what we've done available in the building itself, because we know that that's where our partners are on a regular basis. Yeah. I don't know if you want to say anything about the...
Yeah, I don't really have a ton to add to that. Again, I mostly come in, and a lot of those decisions have already been made, which is very exciting for me. just in terms, one of the very first things we did, we started talking about the exhibit was to go to the Sim Center itself and speak to the director there and sort of like think about like what would be suitable places, what's possible, just those kinds of
Yeah.
decisions.
Yeah, and so with the kiosk, it was really a conversation with Stephanie Howard, who's the director of the building, about where can we put this, because it does involve technology. We want to make sure it's kept safe. We want to make sure they have space for it. It's not going to get in the way of people, right? So there is a spot in the conference room, which is where the Mary Awkward Fairfax exhibit already is. There's a corner in that room where we can install it very easily. They can lock that door, so they can open it up for people that want to see it, but they can also lock it. So the kind of technology is sort of safe in that way, but it's also very much a room that gets used all the time. And that was a conversation that we had with Stephanie to figure